Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Mason J Show. Happy November. Just a little podcast update. We are nearing the end of season 2. We've got about 3 episodes that are going to be published over the next 3 Thursdays. Every episode, every Thursday. I'm going to be traveling to Maryland this weekend to film an episode with Evan Offstein, who is a man of many hats. Keep an eye out for that one as I put some more content coming out, and then also going to Los Angeles the weekend after that to film a podcast with Sierra, a travel nurse working all around the country throughout COVID. So that's going to be an awesome conversation as well. In today's podcast, we have Roger Ray Bird, who is also a man of many hats. And in this podcast, we start off with Roger's move to Vail, Colorado, which took him into the career of being a professional mountain bike rider, and he's now retired past that. But we touch on the events before and after, and how today Roger is a published author, a philanthropist with 2 nonprofits. He's also a life coach for people struggling, through events in their life that, again, we touch on in the podcast. So all in all, a very intimate and vulnerable and eye-opening conversation with Roger today. I hope you guys do enjoy. We are going to get a quick word from our sponsor and then jump right into the episode. All of Roger's content can be found in the description of this video, including his book, his podcast, both named Lies Between Us, and Roger's website, where you can find all Roger's information. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the podcast.
Hey guys, going to take a quick break from the episode just to highlight a sponsor of this season of the Mason J Show, and today we have Spencer Benger, a loan officer with Fidelity Direct Mortgage, here to offer the listeners of my podcast some free knowledge and education on the home buying process, and hopefully to be your loan officer when it comes to your new home purchase or refinance of the current home you have. Spencer has been in the mortgage industry for over 8 years and run through the home buying process thousands and thousands of times, and that means that he is an absolute expert and will catch the little details that turn into big problems down the road. Spencer is offering a free consultation to any of my listeners to go over your credit and your home buying eligibility to see if you qualify for the home or refinance that you're looking for. All you have to do is send an email to spencer@fdmhome.com, reference the podcast, and that you're there for your consultation. Spencer is somebody that I absolutely trust because I've seen him work firsthand, and I wouldn't put a sponsor on the episode if it wasn't somebody or something that I think would really help you guys out. And I actually mean that. Thank you guys so much. Back to the episode. Spencer's NMLS ID is 1202142, and Fidelity Direct Mortgage's number is 188829. Thanks, guys. Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Mason J Show. I am proud to have Mr. Roger Ray Bird on the episode today. We are on location. Roger was nice enough to have us at his house, have me at his house today, out here in Wisconsin. So, Roger, welcome.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for making the drive and making the trip and the effort. Mm-hmm. It's good to see you and good to have you here.
Yeah, I always like a good adventure. For those that don't know, I was out in Chicago for this weekend, did the episode that may come out before or after this with Iron Mind Joe, the owner of Iron Mind Gym, down there in Chicago. So I thought, you know what? Why not miss an opportunity to come see Roger and explore a little bit about where your life is taking you?
Yeah, it's only 2 hours from Chicago up here in Madison, so not too hard of a trip on you.
No. I've been up here before, too. I went to Wilmot a few times when I was living in Chicago to ski, so, vaguely familiar with the territory.
Yeah.
But let's jump right into giving everybody a little bit of a preview background kind of who, Roger Ray Bird is and why we have you on the podcast today. You're a very accomplished cyclist in races out in Vail. And then did you race at all on the East Coast as well?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so let's kind of just jump right into that. Is cycling an area that you found naturally, or was that always a passion of yours growing up?
Well, I raced full-time for 17 years, 9 years as a pro, and I liked racing. Originally, I just thought bike riding was fun. It was a great opportunity for me to get out and adventure before I started driving. Mm-hmm. But then I used cycling as an opportunity to find myself and ground myself. And I really latched onto it hard. And I turned pro, and I raced pro for 9 years. So yeah, I raced on the East Coast and in Colorado and then back on the East Coast.
What about mountain biking was this grounding sense for you that helped you to find yourself?
It was more about being in the woods and being by myself and having that alone quiet time, but then also being in nature. You know, I'm not on the roads. And I figured out a lot of myself because through the physical activity and really pushing myself and seeing how far I could go with it, I learned a lot about my limits and my strengths and my weaknesses.
Yeah.
And that's always good.
I find that, right, I haven't gotten into mountain biking myself, but snowboarding I'm very avid in. And I can definitely relate to those statements with the same thing that applies when I'm on the mountain snowboarding. It's just like the solitude of being in the woods and being in these extreme environments that, you know, Colorado and that western side of the country offers is a just mind-altering experience and like a sense of environment that gives extreme gratitude to you, almost an unavoidable gratitude that I see in a lot of the friends that I've had that have moved to Colorado and also the ones I've met out there. Everybody in that area seems to have a unified appreciation for whatever activity, you know, we're doing at the time. But it's a beautiful place to find yourself, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting because everyone's there for something. You know, there's this whole transient community that come in and out of the western states ski towns. And people come from South America and New Zealand all over. And everybody's there for their own reason, which I find very interesting. Are they running towards something? Are they running away? Are they trying to figure something out? Are they trying to grow or explore? For me, I moved to Vail to survive. I was a drug addict in Baltimore City, and I'd overdosed twice, and I knew the end was near. And I found comfort in the mountains. I lost my mother. Well, I didn't lose her. She left our family when I was very young, and I used the mountains as comfort for me. And, you know, when I was 21 years old, I just packed up and moved to Colorado to be a ski bum because I knew I would die in Baltimore as a junkie otherwise.
Were you into the ski culture when you were in Baltimore?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were going to the PA Hills and
Yep. Seven Springs, Round Top, Pennsylvania, Wisp,
right.
You know, Hidden Valley.
Did you make that move alone?
I went all alone.
Wow.
I had $400 cash in my pocket, no credit card, no debit card. Got in my little Subaru station wagon, took both my bikes, all my skis, all my clothes, moved to Vail. I didn't even know where I was going.
When you left Baltimore?
I didn't know. I thought I was going to Purgatory,
Oh.
the ski resort, or Mammoth, or Jackson Hole. I had no idea. And I just pulled over in Vail and ended up getting a job offer in like 5 minutes.
That's awesome. That's a nice place to end up of all
Not
the
bad.
You know, places along the way that could have stopped.
Yeah.
Did you find the relief and the sanctuary in Vail that you were looking for?
I did, and then some. And I went out there with high intention. I was very specific about what I was trying to do, or more so not do, you know? And do an inventory of that when I came home. I accomplished that and more. So that was good.
That's a really big move to make that I'm sure everybody is going through different life stages at the moment. And it's been a trend of the conversations that I've had in the podcast and with my guests. A handful of them have also made the venture to Colorado. And I always find it interesting what brings people. And I like what you said, how some people in that area or in new like melting pot cities are running towards something or running away from something. And I find it always a curious conversation which side of that fence people fall on. Because for me, I was running towards snowboarding and the adventure, but I guess you could also say I was running away from the lack of activity or positive influences in Baltimore. And not to speak bad, that's not what I meant necessarily by that statement.
Yeah.
But I found that my environment around me at the time was limiting my potential. And not necessarily because of the people, but more so just because I was in this time of self-discovery and finding my passions, and those were the outdoors and those were snowboarding. And this, dream of Colorado was this big like pie in the sky idea that I had tried to make happen before. And now that the time had come and I had money and it was a realistic thing, it was scary, as I'm sure it was for you as well, making that move. I can't imagine making that move with only $400,
I didn't care.
Yeah.
Because what I was running from was the Grim Reaper. I was running from death.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that the comfort was waiting for me there in the mountains. I had no idea how it'd work out, but I didn't care because I had nothing to lose.
Do you feel like that decision to move, that decision to run to the mountains has, well, I bet the answer to this is yes. I was going to ask, has it positively changed, your life? But looking around, I mean, you are very accomplished where you sit now.
You're too kind.
Well, I'd say it how I see it,
It's just stuff.
Of course. But the stuff is, I mean, these trophies and photos and, even the organization skills that you have now are all a reflection of lessons that you've learned along the way.
It's been a journey. I'm also twice divorced,
Mm-hmm.
and I live alone
Mm-hmm.
in a big house. So measure accomplishment, right? I'm fine. I'm great. I love my life. I love where I am right now, but I love the journey and that roller coaster ride.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you say that these mementos that, surround us right now are memories of the journey that continue to, every time? That's why I like to hang things up too. It's like all these photos are time capsules from times in your life of the past. I'm starting to gain my collection of mementos that I feel strongly enough to hang up, and I'm making new memories and stuff along the way. And I love the artistic expression of things that people hang on their walls.
Yeah.
I think it's often taken for granted when you meet somebody and they have like art up on the walls, like everybody has something on their walls. But I mean, you especially looking around, like this garage that you've put together is incredible. A lot of it, for those that aren't here physically, it's a lot of mountain biking photos and trophies, I assume, from your racing competitions. Looks like some mountain biking and motocross involved, and it's, this is your capsule of your life.
Well, they're pieces of me, right? They're small little bits that certainly add up to part of the whole, but each and every trophy, each and every little number plate or photo, there's a huge story behind it. And that's what I find a lot of value in, is the steps along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you a question. So you're in
Absolutely.
Denver.
Yes.
So you're about an hour and a half from any of the ski resorts. Do you think you'll ever make the leap and end up on the hill somewhere? Or are you going to stay in the big city?
I'd love to. I've been thinking about it recently, and it's a matter of finding housing, but also at the moment with me pursuing the podcast a little bit more heavily, that has put a bit of unpredictableness into my income.
Yeah.
So that's a factor. I'd love to move up there. It's been important for me being in Denver to set and establish like a good friend group, which I don't know if that would be as easy to do in the mountain towns and Summit. I mean, there's a great community around Breck and Frisco and Dillon. But the access to just like meeting vast numbers of people is definitely way better in Denver. So if I had to give you like a prediction, I'll probably set my my friend group and establish myself in the Denver area a little bit more. I'd love to be in the Summit County area during winter because I-70 traffic, for those that don't live in Colorado, I-70 is the main, corridor highway that cuts through the mountains, which on a complete side note is an incredible feat of human engineering to build that highway.
Yeah.
But that road can clog up with 3-4 hours of traffic on a busy ski day home or to the mountains. So yeah, it's, my whole purpose of moving to Colorado was to dive into the snowboard and outdoors culture. So moving and living in Summit seems like a natural progression down the line, so that I can easily ski on the weekends, snowboard. I use ski and snowboard interchangeably, just, it's a shorter word.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to move out there. I'd love to get much better, at the sport. I think it'd be really cool to get involved in a downhill snowboard race team down the line. I'm not sure if my age puts me out of the running for those type of things, but
Well, most of the towns have town races. And so anybody in town can race. And so there's obviously different categories. But the town races in Vail were super competitive.
Yeah.
For everybody.
There's a lot of athletes out there.
Well, and it's a shared passion. And from my experience living in a small town, mountain town, I lived in Vail, I lived in Avon, which is at the base of Beaver Creek, Vail's sister resort. I think compared to a big city, like we both grew up in Baltimore. So I found it easier to make dear friends in small mountain towns because you're working together, you're skiing together, you're hanging out, maybe partying or whatever together.
Very true.
And you build those relationships almost tighter because you don't have the distraction of the big city. Like everybody's got their big job and, whatever. But that's just my experience.
It's very true. That's a great perspective. And I absolutely see what you mean. And hearing that definitely soothes my, or the concern of that aspect of living up there. Yeah, it'll be to come.
Yeah,
for
cool.
sure. I've heard great things about it. I'm curious to ask you, you had mentioned briefly that you survived 2 overdoses prior to moving to Vail. A big point of meditation in my life, or just like thoughts that I enjoy thinking about, is life and death. And do you fear death?
No, not at all.
Did you ever?
No.
Has that been a propellant for you chasing the more high adventure activities in your life?
No, because I had to fill a passion. I had to fill my heart. I had to fill what brought me joy. And it just so happened that wheels and speed and skis and jumping off cliffs was involved in that. It's not risk-taking. It's not being reckless. It's not being accident-prone. It's about living. For me to be competitive on the international mountain bike circuit as a pro, you have to push your limits. And even if you're out skiing in Park City for fun, well, if there's a cliff there and there's 5 feet of powder at the bottom, that's a lot of fun as long as you land it correctly, And to me, I've been more concerned about death a few times when I was very, very close to it. And more so, it was the possible regret I might have not saying goodbye to someone. I have 2 children, so I have two kids. So obviously there's a dynamic there that I have to make sure I cover my bases. And I've worked very hard for a long time, over a decade now, to put things in order so that if today's my day, then today's my day. I tell my kids I love them every single time I see them or talk to them or text them. And they say it back because they know why I'm saying it. Because it might be the last time.
And you guys, like, that was a point in the upbringing for them to make that not a scary thing, or more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Possible. It's a possibility.
It's a reality.
It's a reality. That's the word I was looking for.
It is a reality. It's a reality. I might not see the sunrise tomorrow. It's a reality. They might not see the sunset tonight.
Right.
So I have to deal with that too. Right?
Right.
So have I put things in order, both in my mind and my heart and in the physical world, to the point where if this is it, then this is it. And I'm fine with that. I really am. Part of it is I was very hurt and sad and mad when I was a little kid. And a lot of that fueled my drug addiction and my self-abuse there. But it was really about just living, because I knew what not living felt like, and it sucked. It still sucks, and I don't do that.
Right.
I don't do that anymore. I live hyper intentionally. I wake up every day, I make a list. It might be a short list, it might be a simple list. It might be a list with a lot of gaps in it, but I make a list. And I have all my shit written down. What are my priorities? What are my values? What are my rules for living? Because I might not have another tomorrow. Did I do everything I could have done today? Well, not everything, but I did good enough. And that's a very comforting position to be in, to say that I did what I did.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely does. And it's very in line, and it's interesting, how you've come to that realization and belief in your life, because I have a very similar way of thinking, but obviously I came to that, in different paths. But I'm of the same belief that life isn't guaranteed. I haven't had any particular close to death experiences, thankfully, up to this point, but through my research, that's right, knock on wood, through my research and education on different, a lot of Stoic philosophy and how people have lived their lives in the past, or maybe just articulated this belief around life or death. It's the realization that, this life is not guaranteed. This body that we have is not guaranteed. The mind that we have is not guaranteed. And it's really all a privilege that most people take for granted, because we've had it our whole lives and we've always had it. But I don't think there's any room in this life to not live and take the opportunities when they come. And for me, that's manifested as the adventurous opportunities. Moving to Colorado as soon as I had the chance, taking every opportunity I can to, go out in the woods and experience as much as possible, and never let myself or instead catch myself when I have the thoughts enter my brain of, we can just do this another time. Let's not take this time. Instead it's always, no, we're going to do this now because we can do it now. We have the opportunity. There's a group of people in some situations that are willing to, I might be tired. I might be not feeling it 100%. But for me, it's more important, and I've prioritized making those memories because of the same point. The moment's never the same. There's no time like the present. And for me to seize these opportunities as they roll through has propelled my happiness to new levels that I hadn't experienced, prior to this philosophy of going through life.
I take it one step further. Life's not guaranteed. Life will end. Nobody gets out of here alive.
Very true.
if I die tomorrow, am I going to make today worth it? If I die tomorrow, do I carry regret? If I die tomorrow, is there someone who I'm holding out of my heart that I have not forgiven, and they don't give a shit? I'm carrying the weight.
Mm-hmm.
When we judge and blame someone and we put them out of our heart, they don't care most of the time. They don't care like we care. We carry the weight. We carry the guilt. We carry the burden. It's not necessarily guilt.
Mm-hmm.
But the load is on us. And I will die. And I've come very close many times. I've had a bunch of injuries, a bunch of surgeries, and a bunch of head injuries that just about made me a vegetable.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I die riding my bike or cutting my grass. I hope I don't get a stroke and end up in a hospital bed for 10 years. I know people like that.
Mm-hmm.
I had to take care of my uncle last winter who had a stroke. He can't take care of himself. I moved to Jackson Hole to take care of him. 24/7 caregiver. Brutal job,
Mm-hmm.
right? I hope I go fast and easy. The alternative sucks. So for somebody who works till they're 70 and they say, I'm going to wait to travel till I retire, and then they retire at 70 and then their health gives out on them. And then they're not going anywhere.
Right.
And then they watch TV for the rest of their lives.
It's no way to live.
Well, it's a way to live. It's not a way I would prefer. There's certainly plenty of people that do it. I'm not going to judge them, but I prefer something else, just like you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's why we're here. That's why we're doing stuff. That's why you're taking a gamble and you're out there and you're spending your money and time. You know, 2.5 years ago, I quit all my work. I fired all my clients. I've made zero revenue for 2.5 years to follow my heart because I know that my battery will expire one day.
Is that that you're referencing the book that you're
I'm
writing?
writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm writing a book to my children to tell them everything that happened with me so they know everything. When my father died in 2008, he left me an 18-page letter that I never knew about. And I got it after he died. And I read it and I'm like, where's the rest of it? I want more. He told me all this stuff I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted more. And so I took that thought and I'm like, well, if I'm that way, it stands to reason my children have to be at least part of the way towards me of the same thinking. So what if I wrote down everything I had to tell them? What if I wrote down everything that I experienced and everything I learned? And can I make sense of it now and write it down? And it turned into about a 3,000-page book, some split it into volumes. But yeah, it's important to me.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm not stuck with what my father didn't tell me, but I would have liked to know more.
Do you find it therapeutic to go through this process of creating this book and putting your entire life story, you know, on page, on written word? What has that experience, you know, working through those 3,000 pages been like?
It's been incredibly therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
It's been eye-opening. A lot of things that I either thought or believed, I had to prove them. And sometimes my thought process changed through the writing. So it was more powerful than I could ever experience.
I can't even wrap my head around, you know, I mean, I'm only 24 right now, like the process of writing a book. It's incredible that, you know, you've been able to put these last 2 years in devotion and like full concentration into this venture. Is there any prediction on when it may be released?
Well, the first volume's at the printer, but I couldn't wrap my head around it either. I didn't read a book till I was 30. I dropped out of high school and never went to college. So you say I can't even wrap my head around it. I didn't know how to write. I mean, I can write, I'm literate, but I've never written anything. So that was interesting. So it's been a wild ride for sure.
What are you looking forward to next after the book project?
Well, the book project, like I said, I thought it was only going to take me 10 months. It's been 2.5 years, and I just got the first volume done, and I have 3 more volumes. I don't think I'll be done for another 1.5 years. So after that, probably sell this house, the city house. My kids are both in college, but they're not totally stable on their own yet. And I'll probably sell this house and move up north to my woods cabin. And where I go from there, I'm not sure, but I don't care. And I just try to go with what feels right. And, what you were saying earlier is, you try to go in a direction that you feel fuels you or fills you. And what I like to say is I try to say yes more than I say no. Even when I'm tired, even when I don't have the money, even when it might be more intimidating than I care to put up with. I try to say yes. I try to show up. I try to go anyway. Jump. Just jump. Even if I can't see where I'm going to land. That's not recklessness. There's some calculation there. But I don't know. I think the big next transition will be sell the city house, move to the cabin, and go from there.
There's 2 things, and maybe we can put one of these for later in the podcast. I'm curious to talk about the cabin because I am intrigued at the way that you use that as a retreat from, let's just say, life, right? That's a place of concentration that you don't have any service, no internet, no phone, that you go to work, really, which I think is a great idea because I myself find the difficulty when I work of just the phone being such a parasite in my brain. Like it's an addiction that has been very hard to maintain while the phone is right there or plugged in, or because it's also a tool, but it's also a drug in a sense. Let's pedal that for a minute. I'm curious to ask, are you a man of religion or faith?
My father was a Protestant minister for 30 years. So I got it shoved down my throat. Because of my defiance, I did not go to church when I had a choice to go or not. I would say I'm spiritual. I think deeply about everything. I care greatly about others. And when you look at the lessons, the foundational lessons of almost any religion of the world, help thy neighbor, put others first. It's kind of a consistent theme, right? No matter where you are. And that's what I do. That's where I found myself. And so am I of faith? I am of faith that my life is up to me. And my life is about choices. And however much time I put my cell phone in front of me, and however much stress I put myself under, or how many commitments I make to others, or what I sign up for, or the truth that I tell or not in the world, my faith is it's all up to me. And I I think that's the best way I can answer it.
Yeah. Well, I relate. I think a lot of my generation has moved away from traditional religious practices, at least in my circles of friends, and moved more towards the faith, spirituality without like a definition to it. The more how you just explained, it's a self-regulated belief system where we're all kind of in charge of ourselves, but we're also influenced and influencing those around us. So there's a responsibility there to not only treat yourself with respect, but the others around you, and be people are seeing the importance of being good role models to the circles, you know, that surround them of people. And this idea of having faith but without putting a definition to it or putting a name or religion to it, I kind of find comfort in, because it's taken away a lot of the divisiveness that comes from, you know, in a way, picking a side. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it when it comes to like structured religion, but I have found comfort in, you know, setting my beliefs very similar to how you just described, right? Like I have faith in my life that things are, let me preface this. I have experienced so far that if I treat others with respect, if I do good by myself and by those around me, and I do my best effort to, you know, be honest and not take advantage of situations or people, that I have gotten a lot of good luck thus far. A lot of the things that I've pushed for have I'm very grateful that a lot of the things that I've pushed for have fallen into place through my use of my social network and through the use of my own, you know, hard work and dedication. And it almost feels sometimes, it almost feels unreal, or surprises me the way that things have fallen into place thus far. And it's hard for me to put a finger on it. It's hard for me to know if it's because I have a level of privilege and people help me along the way. It's hard for me to know if it's more based on me actually, you know, putting out a good energy and people trust in the visions that I have, or see the work that I do behind the scenes. But regardless of what the reason is, I've definitely found that by abiding to those kind of morals, what I've mentioned before,
Yeah.
that life has become a lot more in sync, and my visions and goals have manifested like way more fluently than before, when I may have looked to cut corners or saw opportunities to kind of get ahead without having the right morals behind it. Yeah. So I was curious if that's, you know, a similar path that you found yourself through the years, but it sounds like it's similar.
Yeah. Well, that stuff doesn't happen by accident. It's a choice of how we carry ourselves, what we commit to, what we follow up on, our ability to say sorry, our ability to admit when we're wrong, our work ethic to go above and beyond and fix something that we broke or abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
It's all up to us. And I think it's similar to what you said earlier. There's a self-responsibility that I've learned. To me, I'm a stickler for detail and virtues, morals, values, beliefs. However you slice it, that's what I mean. It doesn't happen by accident. I sat down and spent thousands of hours trying to figure out what I stand for. Who am I? And what am I going to do and not do? And that was a fascinating exercise. and it's something that isn't really never ending. But I think for me, I don't use the word prayer in so much of a positive light. I'm not sitting around waiting for someone to come save me or fix it. I have faith, I have hope, and I try to rely on myself. And I think that's my religion, is it's up to me. And
Just like
I've proven that
extreme ownership and extreme, responsibility that this path is yours to create and manage and manifest, and however you want it to go.
Yeah, and it's making no assumptions. I make no assumptions that I'll live tomorrow. I'll make no assumptions that I'm going to win the lottery. Both my parents are dead. I didn't get any money from them. This is it. Everything I got, I earned. And there's no assumptions. I don't blame anybody for why I'm here. I don't blame my mother who left when I was 4. I don't blame her. She was doing her best. It's up to me to make my own life. I can be as mad or sad or glad as I want to be.
I think that that statement of not making assumptions is a hard thing to do and takes a lot of introspection and catching yourself when you do, because it's easy to assume. But I've found, because I've also tried to do it myself, I had an automotive teacher in high school, Mr. Watts, that was a hard ass as it was, but he said something that always stuck with me, and he would write it up on the chalkboard. When we assumed something, he would spell out the word assume, and he would say, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me.
Yeah.
And that's like how it's spelled. Like he'd put the slashes through the words.
Yeah.
And it never really resonated with me when I was younger, but I still remember him saying that, and I've made more of a conscious effort to stop assuming, and that kind of falls in line with, stop judging and stop having expectations of other people. There's kind of like the trio of things to catch yourself on, in my opinion. But that assuming thing is big because for me, it seems like making assumptions leads to disappointment or to miscommunication. And to, instead of assume you know the answer, and this kind of leads into like my whole arching thing of why I like the podcast. It's like, instead of assuming, it's always better to have the conversation and ask and have that dialogue to, maybe the answer is what you thought it was, but 9 times out of 10, it's not the answer that I thought it was going to be, or the reasons behind the answer aren't what I thought they were going to be. And through that self-discipline of not letting yourself assume, I think that opens you up to better relationships and to appreciating others much more, and just to be more part of a community through that conversation.
Easy to say, hard to do.
Absolutely.
Right? Again, intention. To me, I call it the trifecta of ugly. Okay? The trifecta of ugly is judge, blame, and assume. To me, it's truth. When I assume, I'm hanging my hat on my non-knowing of a situation. If I assume, I'm basically lying to myself that I know what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
When I see someone, even if I don't like their behavior, if I judge them as a person, I'm lying. I have no idea what they've been through. I have no idea where they came from. I have no idea what they had to give up or what it cost them to get to where they are now. And when I blame someone for something, that's probably the biggest lie of all. I don't know them.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 people I know best in the world are my children. I'm not them. I don't know their thoughts. I don't know their feelings. I know them better than anyone in the world. And I still stop myself. I cut myself off from assuming, judging, or blaming in regards to my children. Because I don't know shit. I don't. Because I know what I carry and what I came up with and how effectively I've worked through it or not. And I've spent literally 12,000 hours, over 12,000 hours, working on myself. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Do the math, right?
It is a lot.
And I have figured out that to me, it's all comes down to one thing: truth. Trifecta of ugly is judge, blame, and assume. I'm just lying to myself that I know anything, because I don't. I'll judge their behavior. I'll judge their surface level behavior, but I will try to because I can't say never, right? That's a lie, that what I would tell myself. I try to never judge them as a person. It's too much of a ball of wax.
Yeah. I think it's great that you've put so much time. I mean, 12,000 hours, they say 10,000 makes you an expert in activities or projects.
No, I think it's anything.
But
you spend that much time doing anything,
yeah,
you're going to figure something out that's pretty
and
flush through.
Yeah, and kind of where I was going with that is, I know, and we haven't touched on it yet on the podcast, but you also do, would you call it life coaching, or the coaching that you do for a couple of your clients?
I just mentor some people, both parents and young adult, their children, or just individuals, usually people dealing with mental health or substance abuse problems, just because I've been there. I mean, I was on a suicidal rage for about 2 years. My mother was mentally ill. That's why she went away. She was institutionalized, never came back. So, I know something. She was homeless after that for the rest of her life in Baltimore. So I try to help. And so I say I'm a mentor.
I think it's very powerful that you've been willing to turn around and give back your time and your lessons and your education, from your self-reflection, and put that towards bettering, as many people as you can, help. And hopefully that through your book, and I know you also do a podcast as well, that we might as well plug. What's it? The podcast called?
It's called Lies Between Us.
Lies Between Us. And those conversations are centered around trauma.
Usually around trauma and addiction, but not always. But there's always a deep conversation. For me, the help factor, it came from my mother. Watching my mother as a bag lady in Baltimore, I've worked through all this, but it hurts, because I can see her. She's dead now, but nobody should have to watch that. No kid should have to watch their mother lay down in the gutter, essentially. And so I thought that if there's anything that I can do to help eliminate some of that, I will. I started 2 nonprofits, and they're geared towards at-risk children. And the second one is an early education and child care center for children who are experiencing homelessness. So a third of our 52 kids, which is our limit allowed by the state, they're homeless. They live in cars, they sleep at the Salvation Army, or they sleep wherever.
Are those based out of Baltimore?
There's one there's 2 here, they're both in Madison.
Okay.
The first one is Dream Bikes. It's a nonprofit used bicycle store, and it's located in communities that are at risk. Arguably the worst neighborhoods in Madison and Milwaukee. And we hire kids from the neighborhood to run the business top to bottom.
Beautiful.
And we pay them a good wage, and we hire kids as early as 12 years old. You can get a work permit in Wisconsin, 12 years old. The second one, the Plainfield Madison, is here in Madison. There's 2 locations.
Plainfield Madison, is that
The
one?
Plainfield
The Plainfield?
Madison. That's the Early Education and Child Care Center. Yeah.
And is that so it's an early education and child care center. It's like a place where people will send their kids for like the day or the week to have child care. Yeah.
It's child care. We take kids from 6 weeks to 5 years old. So once, 5 years old, it's kindergarten age. We get money from Early Head Start. We get money from the state. We get money from the city. We get money from donations. We have 52 children. It ain't cheap, right? And so 1/3 of our kids are privileged, and they pay the money. They pay a couple $1,000s a month to go there for childcare. But then there's a second third of the kids are partial subsidy. They can afford something. And then the last third are full homeless, full subsidized. They don't pay anything. But it's a strict roll call. There's 52 kids. That's it. That's all we can have. Because obviously there's a lot of regulations to that childcare thing. But, that's a nonprofit, and it's to help kids. Because who's going to help a homeless kid? There's not a lot of resources for that.
Right.
There are. And there's United Way and Salvation Army, and there's a lot of regional resources, but
Not enough.
for us that have things, who have a roof, it's hard to recognize. It's a thin line to being homeless. It's a thin line to being without a roof. Arguably, it's only a couple bad paychecks away, or lack of paychecks away. And then what? Your landlord's only going to be so lenient. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting long-winded.
That's
but
okay.
The reality is that it was a driver from my mother, that I'd see her. I'd ride my bike downtown, either doing a drug deal or whatever. And I'd see her. And I could recognize her.
Are there ways, while we're on the topic, for the listeners of this podcast or anybody that is, in hearing range of this, that they can support the nonprofits that you have?
Well, they can certainly support the Plainfield of Madison, but I would more so suggest just do something. Figure out what are some of the homeless issues in your community. Just get educated just a little. Do something. Donate your coats in the winter. Donate your old blankets in the winter. Whatever. For a lot of the young moms, their biggest need is diapers. They need diapers. So certainly you can write a check, but I'd rather people just get involved where they are. Because that way they're connected, they're invested. And it should be a sustained effort, not just to write a check.
Right. Builds more of a sense of community in your area too, and you get to see
a difference.
You get to see on the ground level, if you do go in person to these headquarters for the nonprofits, you get a better understanding of what your community is going through, and you would never know if you didn't, go take that day to do it. You're not going to see all the hardship from your apartment. If you work from home, you're not going to see all this, and whether you want to see it or not, it's a very real thing in most communities. And it's, people complain a lot, I feel, of, their neighborhoods going bad, or they complain about the homeless issues, but it's very rare, at least, again, I can only speak to the circles of people that I see, but it's very rare that anybody actually is willing to spend time to do anything about it. And it's unfortunate. It was a big point growing up, and, bless my mom's heart, she took, a lot of times on Thanksgiving, we'd go to like Salvation Army or one of the homeless shelters and either do meals or pack like the gifts that the Salvation Army would give out over the holidays. And it's eye-opening. I did a couple of things with Scouts when I was younger too, serving meals down in Baltimore. And even just those experiences, you know, I'm guilty of not doing much. You know, I'm not a perfect person. I can admit that. But those experiences when I was younger definitely opened my eyes to how a lot of people are living. And, you know, Denver has a pretty vast homeless and mental health issue as well, that you see just driving around, and all the people that are kind of just fighting for their lives. In conclusion to that riff, I think it's amazing that you're, you know, taking time out of your life to do not only one, but two nonprofits to give
Wow.
back.
You're too kind. Most days I feel I don't do shit, but I do something, you know? And I think just to write a check, sometimes that money doesn't always get to the people. You know, I have a friend of mine, Charles, who's homeless right now, and he's really struggling. And we did a podcast together. He's episode number 19 of mine, Lies Between Us. Guy's smarter than me, by far. He's college educated. He's got a management degree. I dropped out of high school. I barely got my GED. So smart. But it's just one thing led to another, and a couple dominoes started falling, and there he is, sleeping in a tent. He's lucky to have a tent. But it's a grassroots thing. My friend Charles has 2 daughters and an ex-wife. And he has parents, and he has siblings and cousins. He's a person. My mother, who was homeless for most of her life, she's a person. She's somebody's daughter. She's somebody's mother. She's my mother, right? She's my kid's grandmother. They're people. We're all the same. We're all the frickin' same. Judge, blame, and assume? Strip it all away. We all came from the same place.
And very easily could end up in, you know, those situations if things aren't careful. I mean, I think the pandemic probably opened a lot of people's eyes to how fragile and at risk, you know, yourself or people around you could be if, you know, 1, 2, 3 paychecks doesn't come through that month or that, you know, that span.
It's the assumption. It's the assumption. It's probably a poor assumption, I would say. I'm not trying to judge, but it's a poor assumption saying that life's going to be fine from forever. I've lived to know that that's not true. There will always be challenges, and it all depends on my ability to be able to make it through those challenges, because they will keep coming for sure.
It seems like they always do. I mean,
I have a choice.
I've continuously, again, different circumstances, different challenges, but I've absolutely had the string of financial issues and a continuous thing to overcome this week or next week, or this isn't going to plan, and that, you know. And I had a friend reach out to me a little while ago, and we were talking about some life things, and they were like, when does it stop? You know, when do the challenges cease? And, you know, I'm like, I don't think they do. You know, I just think you get better at navigating them and mentalizing them and figuring out what is do or die, and, you know, what's a real threat versus what can be kind of put to the side at the moment.
You can't control it. There's so much. We can barely control our own thoughts, actions, and feelings. How are we going to control the economy? We can't.
You're not. We'll pause real quick.
It's always going to be hard, but our orientation or our own measurement system of hard, that's up to us to calibrate, you know? And when you say it's a mind shift, that's what I've figured out. It's like you got to put things in order to say, what are my priorities? What are my standards? What am I willing to do or not do? And just go live it, you know? So
I think setting priorities is a very important and sometimes difficult task to really do. Like, your honest priorities that weigh into the quality of life that you live, whether it be the priorities around your physical health or your mental health, or your financial health, right? Those are probably the three big pillars to focus on to make sure that you're sticking on the path, to health. And they're not all the same. Like for me, just speaking in my experiences, my priorities have shifted and continue to move based on where I am and where I am physically or financially, or, in this path of me finding my way through life. But the priorities shift continuously, and it's always a workout of introspection to figure out, okay, this isn't as important. I don't need to, I feel apt at the moment, so we can tailor, maybe the daily workouts back as much and put a little bit more time into like the podcast venture, or put a little bit more time into reading, or put a little bit more time into going outside, because I'm feeling, I'm feeling a little mentally unwell. And that internal conversation has been super important in my life, and really given me the tools to understand myself, and to understand the feelings that I experience, and to recognize them, and to identify when I need something, and to make sure that something isn't dangerous to my health. And I guess what I'm thinking about then is, like, I've always been a big proponent. I've always been against like medicine. I've never really liked it in my life, or felt like I've needed it. I've been blessed with relatively good health up to this point, which I definitely don't take for granted. And it's been a part because like I've never liked like Advil. I've never liked Tylenol, even at the smallest level. And I feel like my dedication to health and healthiness and exercise has definitely helped to offset my need for potential medication.
For now.
Right. I'm only 24. I'm sure things are I'm curious.
Shit happens.
I'm curious what's going to happen as we go older, for sure. That was kind of a bit of a tangent there. But all in all, like I think there's a hyper importance to find yourself in all aspects. And it sounds like you've done just that.
I have. I've got 19 years of writing down who am I. And so I started off, I didn't know who I was, but I knew who I wasn't, or who I didn't want to be, or who I felt I didn't operate as naturally. So I'd write that down. Mm-hmm. But now I have 8 personal documented values, and I score myself approximately every quarter. And it's not to say I'm bad or wrong, and it's not to say I'm winning or losing, right? But it's just to know where I am. Am I living my values? And to me, those 8 values, they haven't changed in about 9 years. And so, yes, they changed and they varied and they kind of fluctuated until I spent more and more time thinking about it and proving them out. And to me, my number one documented personal value is I try to practice truth, honesty, and trust in everything I do. And I found out, it used to be for years I had my number one thing, be a good dad. Well, I couldn't prove that. I couldn't measure it, right? It was too subjective. And I figured out that I couldn't be a good dad until I was truthful, right? My second one is not be a good dad. My second one is I try to find at least moments of peace, calm, and beauty wherever I am and wherever I go. Hence the cabin. Okay, because without my stress level being manageable, at least somewhat regulated, I can't be a good dad, right? And if I'm not telling the truth, both to myself and to my children and throughout the world, I can't be a good dad. So I have these 8 documented values, and they're pretty solid right now. One of them is exercise, right? I'm a former pro athlete. I don't have the speed that I used to have, but it's important for me. It's good for my mental health, and I'm sure it is for you too.
Absolutely.
To work out, you're very fit, and you take your nutrition and your health seriously. Having an organized space is good because that leads to my peace, calm, and beauty. It builds anxiety when things are cluttered or messy or dirty. Surround myself with good people. Give back. Help others. And when I have those written down and I can actually look at them and say, am I doing it? And have objective points of measure for each one. It's a little A-type, a little spreadsheety. But for me, as an addict and kind of growing up without a mother, and I was the rebel, I needed the structure. I needed the routine. I needed the discipline. I needed the rituals. I needed them. It's the only way I could stand soundly in my own shoes.
With me having different events throughout my life and coming here, I mean, I have found much value in the structure in my life as well. And I think that might be a universal thing in progress and growth. And from my my research on other people that are successful, whether it be through podcasts or books, that seems to be a very universal necessity to function, whether you want to say function at a high level or just function at a productive level. I know you're very big, as you mentioned, on your lists and organization, and that's something that I have worked to bring into my life as well. And I found that the simple act of just writing a few things down, like when I have a lot going on, and the perfect example of me is me like working to get this podcast where I envision it to be. There's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of projects that are happening simultaneously, and it is a necessity to jot down 3 or 4 things on a list just to have them out of my brain.
Right.
Just to not have that stress bouncing around, and I have comfort in knowing that, okay, that's over here. I can just look at that and I'll see what needs to be done, and I can just like solely focus on this one thing for now. So I think that is a great takeaway for anybody listening who might struggle with that. I also like the aesthetics of a clean and organized space as well. Do you have you ever heard of Casey Neistat? He's a filmmaker, very popular on YouTube. But him and his brother Van Neistat, they've been in the filmmaking space for quite some time. But I think you'd enjoy the workspaces for both of them.
Yeah.
Because that's where when I look around your garage here, I get a sense of the same type of organization. And a big thing that Casey Neistat says in his videos where he goes over his workspaces is that he can't work at the efficiency and the speed and the level that he needs to if his space is cluttered and he has to take 5 to 10 minutes to look for something to do it, and like it throws off the whole momentum of the entire thing.
And it's safety and it's money. I know there's probably no mystery. I started a garage remodel business, and I had a bunch of clients for a year, and I pimped out their garage. And a lot of similar stuff here. Because to me, when you have a bigger house and you park your car in the garage and you drive in the garage, that's how you go in the house. And if your garage is cluttered, the minute you get out of your car, your anxiety's up. And if you can eliminate that and then have a place for everything and everything is in its place, and you can always find stuff, you don't have to buy 5 box cutters because you keep losing them, or 5 hammers because you keep losing them. I mean, it makes a difference. And it just, for me, it leads to peace, calm, and beauty. That I can relax. I love it in my garage. It's like my little
Your man cave.
safe haven. And a lot of that, I was a bicycle mechanic for like 9 years. And, when you work in a bike shop and there's multiple mechanics using the same big main tool, like it's got to go back in its place immediately. And everybody's got to be clean. And if the workshop faces the retail sales floor, it's got to be a good presentation for the customer. So a lot of it came from there.
Right.
Yeah.
Can we take a moment and shift towards your philosophy around the cabin?
Yeah.
And the lack of connection or cell service out there. What was the motivator behind you taking on that venture and like purchasing the cabin and having this like sanctuary of solitude?
I needed to be in the woods. I needed to be closer to nature. My family had always had a cabin in northern Michigan, and then it got sold, and that was a big void in my life. So when I had the money, I went shopping for a cabin, and I wanted it to be as off the grid as possible. Originally, I was looking for a cabin, no electricity, but it was just too hard to find something that was comfortable enough to live in. So I found a place. It has electricity, it has running water, but I have no internet. There's no TV, so there's no movies or anything. I have no cell service. I'm way up on the woods, way up on the hill, and my AT&T runs out about 20 minutes before I get to my cabin.
Perfect.
So I have no cell service, no internet. I have a landline phone for an emergency, and that's it. I have my music and my books and the woods.
And do you find that your creativity, I'm sure you spend a lot of your time writing at the cabin as well. I feel like I know the answer to this, but do you enter into your flow state much quicker than you would ever when you were here with those influences around you?
Initially, it was dramatically more so, yes. I was much more efficient, creative at the cabin because there weren't people driving by and my iPhone didn't work, right? I didn't have a choice. I didn't even charge it. I didn't care. But I found that when I would come back down to Madison, it's a 5-hour drive between my cabin and my house. So it's a commitment. Right. And I found when I came back to the house and I would start to try to write, I was too inefficient. And I couldn't do my work as well as I needed to. So then I kind of structured a lot of things. I quit jobs. I resigned from board of directors so that I had the time to do my priority work here. And then I didn't call friends as much for a while. And I turned my phone off and I leave my phone in the kitchen and I'd turn on the do not disturb under settings. And, that all has helped a lot. But the cabin more so, it's just an escape. I just get to turn it off,
I don't think enough people have an escape, no matter what, whether it's an escape physically to a place like you have that is a place of their own, or even just like for me, my escape is going on hikes and being in nature, preferably away from the busyness and the tourist spots, and finding hikes that are remote and I don't run into people.
Do you take your phone when you go on a hike? I
do take my phone when I go on a hike, but when I'm in nature, I never feel the need to be on it. I do take it because sometimes I do enjoy music while I'm out there, or for safety reasons, if I need to contact somebody because I'm alone out there, I will bring it. But surprisingly, as addicted to my phone and social media as I get at home, when I'm out in nature, I don't feel that impulse at all to be on it, which is interesting to me. And I don't exactly understand how my brain works. I don't want to question it because I like that I don't have that, But it's interesting that when I'm out there, I don't feel that influence at all. But I don't feel like enough people have this tried and true escape that helps them to decompress during those like stressful times and just kind of recalibrate. And those are the times when I'm able to really get to the root of the problems I'm having or get to the root of the passions that I'm seeking. Whichever way of the spectrum, I'm focusing on at the time, that escape and that tunnel vision thought that's required for that, I can't get at home.
Yeah.
I can't get around my roommates or with access to Netflix or YouTube or social media in my hand. It's a lot of things that I think people are missing. And that's why a lot of people struggle to find their passions now, because there's no extended focus.
I think there's no extended peace.
Also, yes.
That we could turn it off and go sit in our car or sit in our basement or go to the local park. It's a choice. And it's hard, man. I get it, right? It's hard. There's not only the work responsibility and everything else, but there's the social connection. But not everybody can afford a cabin, but it's a choice to turn off our phone or leave our phone at home when we go to the park or just walk around the block or go for a bike ride.
It feels weird.
I do long bike rides. I do 100-mile bike rides that are, 5, 6, 7 hours. I've done a 301-mile bike ride, which is 19 and a half hours.
Wow.
And I don't take my phone on purpose because
it feels spooky. Like,
I don't need it.
For me, when I leave the house, even if it is for a walk, and I know this is going to sound funny, but like there's a sense of dependence that I've built up, with technology over the time, and 99.5% of my day, my phone is by my side, mainly because I work from home, but that's not a real reason. Even if I go out, I have it. But like there's a weird feeling that people have now. Like if you leave your phone at home and you just walk outside, like
something's going to happen.
Maybe. But it's just like it's so strange how that feeling comes now. Like we're so dependent on our phones that even that 5 minutes walk outside of the house, it's just like what do we, where is it? And I've worked to make a more conscious effort to get rid of that feeling. As obviously you have 19 hour 300-mile bike ride. That's a pretty insane feat.
Well,
on its own.
Yeah, thank you.
Not that you really need your phone while you're doing that.
That was just a knucklehead move, probably more to do with my addiction than anything else. But to me, the unique position I have is I grew up before the internet, right? I grew up before mobile phones. So I know that if I go out for a multi-day expedition somewhere, and I've done it before without a phone, even before phones were invented, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Or something will happen maybe, and something else will have to result. So I have that unique perspective that not everybody has. And then I also have the unique perspective that I've spent so much damn time thinking about stuff that it's just a priority for me, that I'm not going to be a slave. And I find myself sometimes getting sucked into it. What I do lately, I have Instagram back on my phone, but Facebook is off my phone. It's on my laptop. But sometimes what I'll do is I'll delete the apps. It doesn't kill all my stuff.
Right.
Right.
I do the same thing.
Just delete the apps from my phone so I'm less tempted. And I can just go into the app store and get a new one. But at least for a while, I'm less apt to go surf.
I have to do that often. I just find moments like I'm very aware now. I pay attention to my addiction level with social media, and I'll notice there'll be times when I'm on it and then I'll get off of it, and then oddly subconsciously my thumbs just open the app back up.
Yeah.
It's like I close it, and then in that split second that my brain gets bored, it literally opens it back up.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds weird the way I'm phrasing it, but that's how it feels sometimes. And I'm like, what am I doing?
It's becoming instinct.
Yeah, and
it's
then
habit.
and that's what it is. Yeah. It's that habit. Like my brain feels this way, and it's been trained. I guess trained it to go to this source of entertainment. But when I get like that, I do the same thing. I mean, I've deleted it off my phone for a week, just to completely decompress. And it's when you do that, you change. I mean, I've seen a week is a good amount of time to feel the need to go on social media, taper off. The first few days you feel bored. The third day it's less. The fourth day it's less. And then, by the time you get back on it, I don't feel the dying need that I did before.
Yeah.
But the same way that I feel it taper off, I feel it taper back on.
Yeah.
Almost in the same amount of time.
Yeah. I think it's power. I think you feel, for me, I feel more in control of myself when I can purposefully turn it off and stay away and actually do it. And then every time you do that, you build strength and confidence in yourself. And a lot of it is proving to ourselves what we can and can't do. And most of us are much tougher than we give ourselves credit for, by far.
I think so too. Or that you even are aware.
That you could even fathom.
Yeah.
Like, what are you capable of?
I like to push myself sometimes.
We could go without food for 10 days, our body easily. We could go without water for days. Our body can put up with a lot. It's crazy.
But can your brain?
Well, that's the trick.
Yeah.
That's like the solitary confinement. It's, there was a very famous officer, Admiral Stockdale, and he was the senior most POW in Vietnam. And he is very famous that he made it through a POW camp for 7 years. And they said, how did you do it? And he's like, I never gave up hope that I was someday getting out. And he goes, but people were dying all around you. And he goes, well, the people who died were the ones who set up false expectations of, I'll be home this Christmas, and they don't.
Right.
And then they die of a broken heart. He goes, I never set myself up for failure. And so just that, what we're capable of, and it's all mental. Like the athletics, it's all mental. My second wife was an ultra marathon runner, 100 miles. She'd run 100 miles in Leadville 100, right? Very famous running and mountain bike race.
Actually just ran into 2 people who did that when we were hiking the other day.
Yeah. 30 miles, 30 hours on your feet.
That's crazy.
30 hours.
That's mental
running.
strength. I just read.
It's all mental.
Cameron Haynes is an ultra marathon runner and experienced professional, one of the best in the world bow hunters. And I just read or listened to his book Endure. And he mentions a lot of his training for ultra marathon running and equally bow hunting for elk in Montana. And a lot of what he talks about is the mental aspect of pushing your body past what the warning signs are, and whether, let's tread lightly with that. Don't get yourself too injured. But it's fascinating to see what people are capable of when they push through that. And granted, I know people at that level have some access to medical care and supplement use and all those that may not be accessible to people at my level, but still with that said,
they're still humans.
The message behind that is still powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
Roger, we are nearing the end of our time here. It's been a great conversation. Is there anything that you would like to plug or say, to the listeners before we conclude?
I don't have to plug anything. I would just say, live with intention. What are you going to do today? What are you not going to do today? I make my list only three or less. 3 or less things I'm going to do today, and 3 or fewer things I'm not going to do today. Today, I'm not going to watch TV. Today, I'm not going to spend more than an hour on social media. Today, I'm not going to eat candy. I'm going to try, right? Then what am I going to do today? I'm going to spend time with you. I'm going to clean my basement, and I'm going to ride my bike. At least try. And with that, I'm much more likely to do it. So
beautiful.
It's a choice. Life's a choice. There's a lot of things that rain down upon us, but our orientation towards that is a choice.
Beautiful.
It's great talking to you.
Absolutely. Really appreciate your
A lot
time,
of
Roger.
fun.
Everybody,
too.
thank you so much for listening and tuning in to another episode. I will catch you on the next one. Bye, guys.